Your special person took your photo to a psychic. They did not tell anyone where they were going. They did not announce it on social media, or confess it to their closest friend. They simply picked up your photo, held it tightly in their hands, and walked into that room carrying questions they were too frightened to ask you directly. Think about that for a moment. They could have called you. They could have sent a simple message. They could have shown up at your door and said everything their heart had been holding for so long. But instead, they chose a stranger. They sat across from someone they had never met and placed your image on the table between them, hoping that a third party could explain what their own soul already knew, but refused to accept. That tells you everything about where they were emotionally. That tells you about the war happening inside them. They loved you enough to seek answers. They feared you enough to seek those answers somewhere else. The room felt different the moment the psychic looked at your photo. There was a shift in the air, the kind of stillness that arrives when something sacred enters a space. The psychic did not speak immediately. They simply stared into your eyes through that image, and what they saw was not what they expected to find. They did not see an ordinary person. They saw light. Not the kind of light that makes people comfortable and easy to be around, but the kind of light that forces everyone near it to confront themselves. They saw a soul that had been through fire, and had not been destroyed by it. They saw wounds that had been transformed into wisdom, pain that had been converted into strength, and a spirit that heaven had been quietly protecting. Through every season of difficulty and confusion, they saw you, the real you, the version of you that exists beneath the smile you wear for the world, and beneath the composed expression you maintain, so that nobody worries about you. They saw the person who cries in private, the person who questions their worth in the silence of 3 a.m, the person who has given so much love to others and sometimes wonders whether that same quality of love will ever find its way back to them. And then the psychic began to cry. Not soft, polite tears that could be quickly wiped away. These were tears of blood, heavy, painful, almost unbearable tears that carried the weight of a revelation, too significant to receive, without feeling it completely in your body. Your special person sat across from this stranger and watched them weep, and somewhere deep inside their chest, they already knew that whatever was about to be said would change something in them, permanently. The psychic looked up from your photo and said 7 words that fractured your special person from the inside. This is the divinely chosen soul you were destined to love, but you may have already lost them forever. Read that again slowly. Not you have lost them. Not a definitive ending declared without room for possibility. The psychic said, may have already lost them. And that single word, that tiny word may, landed harder than any certainty could have. Because certainty can be accepted and eventually moved past. But possibility, the possibility that something precious and irreplaceable might already be gone, that lives in the body differently. That kind of thought does not allow rest. It does not allow distraction. It reaches into every quiet moment and squeezes. Your special person sat with that sentence, and felt it rearrange something fundamental inside their understanding. Until that moment, they had been operating under a dangerous assumption. They had convinced themselves, perhaps not consciously, but somewhere beneath all their reasoning, that you would simply remain available. That your love was the kind of love that waited without condition and without expiration. They believed that no matter how many times they withdrew from you, no matter how many times they went silent when you needed words, No matter how many times they chose fear over honesty, you would still be there when they finally decided they were ready. They treated your patience like it was an endless resource. They treated your forgiveness like it was proof that you had no boundaries. They mistook your consistency for desperation and your loyalty for unconditional surrender. They told themselves that you needed them more than they needed you. And that belief made it easier to keep delaying, keep avoiding, keep choosing comfort over courage. But heaven had been watching the entire time. Heaven watched every night you lay awake, wondering what you had done wrong. Heaven witnessed every moment you edited your words before sending them, because you were afraid of saying too much, or asking for too much. Heaven heard you apologize for your own emotions when your emotions deserved to be heard without apology. Heaven saw you slowly begin to question yourself, your worth, your value, your desirability, not because anything was wrong with you, but because the person you loved had a habit of making you feel like too much and not enough at the same time. And heaven made note of all of it. You were not imagining the connection. Let that truth settle into you because you need to hear it clearly. The bond you felt was not a story you told yourself to make loneliness more bearable. It was not a projection of need onto someone who happened to be nearby. What you felt was real. Your soul recognized something genuine, something that did not feel like the ordinary connections you had experienced before. There was a quality to the way this person made you feel, even in the painful moments, that felt different from everything else. That recognition was accurate. But here is what nobody tells you about divine connections. The fact that something is sacred does not mean it is automatically handled with care. The fact that two souls are drawn together by something greater than ordinary coincidence does not mean that both people will immediately have the courage to honor what they have found. A powerful connection requires something more than destiny to sustain it. It requires honesty. It requires the willingness to be vulnerable. It requires someone to choose love, even when love feels dangerous. Even when it means being truly seen, even when it means releasing every defense that has kept them feeling safe. Your special person loved you. That part was never the question. The question was always whether their love was stronger than their fear, and for a long time, fear was winning. They were frightened of you in a way they could not fully explain, even to themselves. Not frightened in the way one fears danger, but frightened in the way one fears complete exposure. Around other people, they could manage how much of themselves was revealed. They could wear a version of themselves that felt acceptable, protected, and in control. They could be charming without being known. They could be present without being vulnerable. But you were different. When they were with you, or even simply thinking about you, the mask did not sit comfortably on their face anymore. You had a way of seeing through the performance. Not because you were trying to expose them, but because genuine love naturally looks beneath surfaces, and your love was genuine. You were not interested in the curated version they offered the world. You were drawn to the real person underneath, and the real person underneath had wounds they had never fully examined, truths they had never fully confronted, and a capacity for depth they had spent years trying to avoid feeling. Your presence woke all of it up. And that is an uncomfortable thing to experience when you are not ready for it. When you have built your entire survival strategy around staying in control of your emotions, around never needing too much from anyone, around keeping connections at a depth that feels manageable, encountering a love that reaches beneath all of that can feel less like a gift and more like a threat. So they ran. Or they half ran, which is in many ways more confusing and more painful than a clean departure. They stayed close enough that you never fully let go, but far enough that you could never feel fully secure. They gave you enough warmth to keep you present, but enough distance to maintain their own sense of control. They played a game that was not a game, because somewhere in the middle of it all, their feelings were completely real. They just did not know how to hold real feelings without panicking. The psychic saw all of this in your photo. They saw the impact of your special person's fear on your spirit. They saw the self-doubt that had accumulated in you over time. They saw the love you still carried, tucked carefully away in the part of your heart you protected most fiercely. And they saw something else too. They saw what heaven had been building in you during all those painful, confusing months. While your special person was withdrawing, you were growing. While they were entertaining distractions and convincing themselves they did not need to face their feelings, you were slowly, quietly, sometimes painfully learning to choose yourself. Not dramatically, not perfectly, but genuinely. You were beginning to understand that love, even the deepest and most sacred kind, should not feel like standing in a hallway waiting for a door to open. You were beginning to remember what it felt like to be a whole person, independent of their validation. You were beginning to pray differently, asking not just for the connection to be restored, but for the wisdom to recognize what you truly deserved. Heaven was answering those prayers, even when the answers did not look the way you expected. When the psychic told your special person that they may have already lost you forever, what shattered inside them was not just the fear of your absence. What shattered was a story they had been telling themselves for a long time. The story that said they could figure out their feelings on their own schedule. The story that said you would understand and wait, because you always had before. The story that said there would always be another opportunity to get this right. That story broke apart in a single moment, and in its place came a flood of memories that arrived all at once and without mercy. They remembered every time they had held their phone and started typing a message to you, and then deleted it. They remembered every time they almost said something true, and then swallowed it back down. They remembered the specific quality of how it felt to be near you, the ease of it, the warmth of it, the feeling of being both completely comfortable and completely alive at the same time. And they remembered how they had watched that feeling be available to them and had chosen, again and again, to walk away from it, because facing it felt too large. Now that feeling was placed next to a possibility they could not ignore. The possibility that the person who held that warmth, who offered that ease, who loved them through silence and confusion, and all the ways fear had made them inconsistent, that person had not remained frozen in time waiting for them to get ready. That person had kept living. That person had kept healing. That person's had kept becoming someone more complete, more self-aware, and more certain of what they deserved. And somewhere in all of that becoming, the version of themselves that had been endlessly available might no longer exist. The tears of blood were not a dramatic exaggeration. They were a symbol of a particular kind of grief, the grief that comes not from losing something suddenly, but from realizing you had been choosing to lose it slowly and calling that choice by gentler names. Confusion, timing, self-protection, personal growth, space, all of it translated, when laid out clearly, to fear. And fear had cost them something irreplaceable. But now hear this very carefully, because this is the part of the story that belongs entirely to you. This revelation about your special person is not a signal for you to rush back toward them. Their awakening is genuinely wonderful, it is real and it is significant. But their awakening is not your assignment. You did not come into this world to serve as someone else's lesson. You did not endure every confusing and painful moment of this connection, so that you could be available the moment they finally decided to grow. You went through everything you went through, so that you could grow. So that you could arrive at a place where you understood your own value clearly enough that you would no longer accept a love that lived in the in-between spaces, that thrived on almost and maybe and someday, so that you could recognize the difference between a connection that challenges you, because it is helping you evolve, and a connection that hurts you, because the other person has not yet chosen to show up fully. Heaven did not watch over you through all of that pain, just to send you back to the starting point. The moment your special person felt the weight of what they had avoided, your special person may feel an overwhelming urge to contact you soon. They may pick up their phone 100 times. They may scroll back through old messages, trying to find the thread of what you once were to each other. They may hear a song and see your face. They may wake up from a dream about you and lie in the dark for a long time afterward, feeling the echo of your presence and wondering whether they destroyed something that could have been extraordinary. All of that is their journey. Your journey is continuing forward. This does not mean you close your heart to the possibility of reconciliation. It does not mean you turn away from them with bitterness or rehearse all the ways they failed you. Bitterness keeps you as trapped as waiting does, and heaven is asking you to be free from both. What it means is that you do not pause the healing and the growth and the beautiful becoming that has been happening in you during this season, just because someone else has finally caught up to a realization you arrived at months ago. If they return, they cannot return to the same dynamic. The old version of this connection, where you carried most of the emotional weight, where you waded through their silences and interpreted their mixed signals and adjusted yourself to accommodate their fear. That version no longer has a home in your life. If they return, they must return with something they have not offered before. Transparency. Consistency. The willingness to be uncomfortable in their own feelings, without making that your responsibility to manage. They must come back showing that they have done the internal work, not just feeling the pain of losing you, but actually doing something with that pain. Transformation, not just remorse. Action, not just the beautiful words that frightened people often become suddenly very good at, when they realize absence is real. You deserve someone who recognizes your worth before they risk losing you. You deserve love that feels like landing somewhere safe, rather than love that keeps you in a state of perpetual wondering. You deserve someone who does not need the fear of losing you to remember why you matter. Perhaps your special person will become that. Perhaps the awakening that happened in that room, with the psychic and the tears and the photograph, will be the moment everything genuinely shifted for them. Perhaps they will do the difficult inner work, face the wounds that made them run, release the pride that kept them silent, and come back to you as someone who has earned the right to stand beside you. That is possible. Heaven does not close doors that are meant to remain open. But if they do not rise to that, if the feeling fades once the panic of possible loss fades with it, if old patterns surface and fear wins again, then heaven will not allow that person's limitations to become the ceiling of your life, because you are still chosen, not because of what anyone thinks of you, not because of what your special person decides, not because of what any psychic sees in a photograph. You are chosen because heaven placed something remarkable inside you, a quality of love, a depth of feeling, a resilience that has survived every season of this connection, without becoming hard, without becoming closed, without losing its fundamental warmth. That is not a small thing. That is something extraordinary. The love that is written for your soul is not finished arriving. Whether it arrives wearing the face of your special person, transformed by growth and honesty, or whether it arrives wearing a face you have not yet seen, it is moving toward you. And it is moving toward the version of you that has learned, through everything this season has cost you, to receive it without shrinking, without apologizing for needing it to be real, and without accepting anything less than what you know in your truest self, that you deserve. Do not look backward with desperation. Do not allow their awakening to pull you back into a dynamic that had not yet been healed. Do not let the beauty of what you felt together make you forget the weight of what you carried alone. Keep walking forward in faith. The psychic wept because they saw how close your special person had come to losing the greatest love heaven had ever designed for their path. They wept at the nearness of the loss, the inches between holding something sacred and watching it slip away forever. But they also saw your light, still burning, still protected, still guiding you forward toward something worthy of every beautiful, complicated, courageous thing you are. Your special person is learning, perhaps for the very first time, that losing you was never part of any plan they could live with comfortably. They are learning that loving you was never the hard part. Being brave enough to stay, to be honest, to be consistent, to choose love every single day, even when it required them to face the parts of themselves they had been running from. That was the part they stumbled on, but you do not have to wait for their lesson to conclude before you continue living yours. You are loved. You are protected. You are on the right path, and everything heaven has prepared for you is still unfolding, exactly on time.